I apologize for the noise, but I have no choice but to be next to this road. Across the street is a house in the forest preserves. That's going to be your reference point for today's little journey. Not much of a journey because apparently the forest preserves removed what I wanted to show you. So this used to be my old stomping grounds when I was like 13 years old in the Orland area. I'll pop up a map. There's a bunch of high tension wires where I'm at too, so if you ever want to walk out here, it's kind of a reference point. But if you take that driveway and come directly across the street, it's hard to see this time of year, there's a pretty good divot, another driveway that'll come up over yonder here. It just kind of comes up. You'll fall into it. But what used to be here around this turn is a bunch of brick wall and other kind of things. Unfortunately, it is gone today. But this should have been part of the Crandall family. And I'll go back to a more quieter area and talk about the Crandall family. But before we do, there is some remnants of something here. Let's pause. At least we got one brick, right? Some pieces of an old bottom of an old jug. What's cool, I'll clean this off later when I go down and talk, is this is probably going to be one of their little 1800s cork bottles. So anyway, off I go. It's actually another day. It's a very windy day. So the first little trip was getting out to the Crandall properties. So where were the Crandall properties? Well, if you take Ruby Woods where you park to go to the Bachelors Cemetery, 143rd Street. Take 143rd and go west to Harlem Avenue. So at the corner of 143rd and Harlem Avenue, there's a big section. It's southwest. This big chunk of forest preserve southwest is basically was the entire was owned entirely by the portion of the Crandall family. But all some, you know, you got your Herman, your Alva, your David, your Mark. Anyway, I'll pop up maps and stuff like that. You get a feel for this. Plus, you get to learn more about property maps and how things are gridded out. Let's see here. So that foundation that you saw, unfortunately, it's the only pictures I have of it because now it's long gone. And the original 35 mils are at another location, so I had to dig those up if I want to make any real good copies of them. But they are archived somewhere else. So in section 12, we would have been in the Mark Crandall area. So their property, basically all of them bought stuff in 1835. So this is during the first Illinois land sale kind of things. Pause here. Actually, so to give you a basic background on the land stuff back in the day. You came out, you were a settler, you found some property, made some improvements or whatever the legal requirements were, and then you could lay claim to some of that land. And then there's other times where you just didn't meet the standards, whatever they were, and then unfortunately at some point all that land we stole from the Indians, they wanted, you know, our government wanted to like start selling it and do funny things with it, so they started a bidding process. I believe it started at $1.25 an acre. Yeah, I wish, right? And it's gonna get kind of windy. I got notes, the tablet thing going on, so I'll be pausing. And so basically this land stuff, the Crandall family didn't put up with a lot of shit. Some of them were kind of feisty. Others were, you know, not so much, but I really enjoy the Crandall family. They you'll see why. So by the way, the Crandalls had two lots that we know of. Lot 25 in Bachelors Grove Cemetery and lot 59. Yeah, 59. In lot 25 though, through Brad Bettenhausen's research, all of them were relocated. They were dug up and reburied at Mount Greenwood Cemetery in Chicago. And let's see what we got. We got your Elizabeth Crandall, baby Crandall, Alma Crandall, A-L-M-A, and that's important later, and then Clara Weber. The original notations were for Mark Crandall, which he moved away. We'll get to that maybe. Joe Fulton was involved, and Benjamin Argyle as part of the property ownership with these plots or something. But again, everybody in 25 was relocated to Mount Greenwood. Then in lot 59, should be Alva Crandall, A-L-V-A-H, and it's the same name as far as ownership goes. Now, in the Pioneers in Peaceful Rest article, which goes back many, many moons ago, somebody who was on site read from the stone. Brad Bettenhausen made some notations, so I'll read those off. Mentioned in Pioneers in Peaceful Rest, one of the earliest stones in the cemetery is that of Alva Crandall, who died July 20th, 1843 at the age of 39. It is a shaft about 3 feet tall, oblong in shape, and well preserved in comparison to some of the others. Several Crandalls were prominent in the early history of Bremen, Thornton, and Worth townships, and even today, Dan Crandall of Worth is township road commissioner. Let's see. Alva, born July 20th, 1804, was a brother of Heman, David, Mark, Martha, married Stephen Jones, Elizabeth. Oh boy, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. So if you want to go see the record here for lot 59, you can read more. And at the bottom of this, of lot 59, is where I'll start reading from something. I have to go to another location, so I'll clip that in. Something a little bit more quieter than all this kind of crap. And it basically gives you an idea of what happened back in the day when the Crandall family got kind of feisty about people bidding on their land. Yeah, wait for that part. So back to today's little tour of the Crandall property, which is actually a hidden gem. If you live in the area, you're gonna be like, how the hell did I miss this? Because there's so many cool ravines and stuff. So basically, if you live in this area, this might make more sense to you. There's a big corner section of property. So on the north side, it's 143rd Street. To the east side is Harlem Avenue. To the west side is 82nd Avenue. And then to the south side is 151st Street, which is the only parking lot for this particular forest preserve. It's called Catalina Grove. I have to look into why they called it that. I really call it Crandall Grove. Maybe it's one of their names. There are some notes in here from the history of Blue Island before the Civil War from 1917. They found some letters in the Chicago Post Office for Alva, A-L-V-A, Alva Crandall, dated May 30th, 1835, residence, Bachelors Grove. This is not going to be some sort of exhaustive list on the Crandall family. Ooh, somebody's flying a drone above. Interesting. And yeah, they've got a camera on it, so they've been coming into the woods more and more and more. It's been kind of fun to watch. Again, this is not an exhaustive thing. So what I did, though, is I did visit Mount Greenwood today before recording this, and just finally took some pictures of the cemetery records, maps, kind of thing. Yeah, we know about these things, but it's nice to have copies of it. Some people have put some stuff online. It's not entirely legible. There are some questionable photos. I want to verify it, of the Crandall family, because I did notice that the same person that was posting these photos got some things wrong. They weren't the right families or the right people, that kind of thing. So, yeah. Anyway, hey, gotta get off my ass and do it too, right? So here's what we'll do. I'm gonna cut to my little short visit, just so you get an idea of the lots and my comments on it, and then I'm gonna cut into the just the scenic overview, going inside all those Crandall properties, or most of them, because some of them do have houses, but most of it is forest preserve, so you can kind of go out there and enjoy yourself. But in the, let's check it. So when you look at this map here, it's the David Crandall area that has the ravines. It's going to be more on the southern portion. So when you pull in the parking lot, there's an open prairie. If you look straight ahead, there's a cluster of woods kind of straight ahead to your left. It's that patch of woods that has really deep ravines. Really cool stuff. The Forest Preserve cleared out that whole thing. In fact, there was a cleanup project. It was called the Tinley Ravine Restoration. I may have a picture of it when they put the banner up. Which, just side note, just for fun, when we had the police trail cameras up here one day, I believe it was the Rick the caretaker incident. It originally said Tinley Ravine, Tinley Rav. So they had some trail cameras up there. Anyway, I'll get to that later. Man, there's a lot of bugs today. All right, without further ado, enjoy the rest of this. So this is the burial location of the Crandall family, at least one of them. Actually 3 different blocks here. So let's see if I could give you a better indication. There's some headstones back here. All these here, some big ones, and yeah, this is generally the location. From some of the burials, I went from Bachelors Cemetery to here. Now there are some other things I got to look into, but generally, this is it. Some are marked, some are unmarked. Apparently they have some cleaning dues that are past due. Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works out, I wonder. But they're still taking care of it. They got some sort of perpetual care thing too going on. So some lots needed their dues and others paid for life. So some of the unmarked ones are the ones that we are probably more interested in based on who was relocated here. But yeah, so this is just a little quick trip, Mount Greenwood. Centralia, Illinois, January 6th. Rexford of the city furnishes some unpublished reminiscence of land and grain speculations in Chicago early days. Mr. Rexford is son of Norman Rexford, who opened and kept the first hotel at Blue Island in 1835. The hotel consisted of 5 log buildings. Mr. Rexford finally succeeded his father as proprietor of this hotel. He relates some of the interesting events in which the early settlers came in collision with the land speculators, who were operating in Chicago even at that early stage of the city's development. He said, "There were a good many settlers who had preempted land, and had made many improvements, but had not satisfied the law in that respect. Some had been too late to make all the required improvements. The holdings of these persons, as well as vacant lands, were sought and purchased by the speculators. My Uncle Stephen and my father had both settled on land, claim to which had not been perfected, when in June 1835 a public sale of land west of Indian boundary was announced. The sale was to take place between Water and Lake Streets, on the west side of Clark. Mr. Rockwell represented the government in the sale of the land. The spirit of speculation at the time was wild. On the part of the settlers, who had partly perfected their claims, there was open hostilities against the coterie of men who, it was rumored, proposed to bid on settlers' claims. There promised to be war to the knife. There was a family of 4 brothers, some of whom had walked as many as half a dozen times from Chautauqua County, New York, to settle land in Illinois. It was cheaper to walk those days than ride. The Crandalls were David, Herman, Alva, and Mark. Dave was a powerful fellow, with a voice like a foghorn, and was chosen as the spokesman for the settlers. The sale took place June 20th, 1835. Hotel accommodations were insufficient, so the settlers camped on the lakefront from Randolph Street south. There the ox teams were turned loose to graze. The settlers gathered for the sale, greatly alarmed at the prospect of the speculators bidding more than $1.25 an acre for the land on which they had established themselves. They held a meeting and passed resolutions to the effect that the actual settler should have his land at $1.25 an acre, whether he had preempted it fully or not. This they proposed to have peacefully if they could, forcibly if they must. When this resolution was ready, Dave Crandall in thundering tones shouted out, "And blood not accepted? Settlers have a lusty champion." When the sale commenced the next day, Rockwell read the terms of the sale. He stood on a balcony, the settlers raging about him below. The terms stipulated that any person interfering with or intimidating highest bidders should be liable to a fine of $500 and 1 year's imprisonment. Excitement was at fever heat. The settlers knew that some of the land would not stand the legal test, and consequently by law it could be sold to the highest bidder. Rockwell had no sooner stopped reading than Dave Crandall mounted a box and cried, in a voice that rang out over the prairie, saying, "Settlers, the first man that bids on your land, knock his brains out." There were only a few of the speculators who were bent on having the land of the settlers. Most of them were bidding among themselves on different tracts of their own, and to that the settlers had no objection. Peter Bowles was one of the most determined of them. He was armed and openly avowed his purpose of bidding on a claim. When the claim he wanted was put up, Dave Crandall was observed clearing a space about the spot on which Bowles had taken a position. Someone inquired of Crandall what he was about. "Never mind, boys," he coolly answered. "Just step aside and give me 6 feet of space. I want to lay out a corpse." Bowles had been standing on a box consulting a map which he had hung on the wall of the building. He immediately took the hint, got down from his perch, and walked away, never opening his mouth. There was one man who did make a bid. He was said to be a preacher who had been commissioned to do the following for a township. To do the bidding for a township, sorry. No sooner had he got up to $1.30 than Alva Crandall ran out of the door and knocked him down. The preacher was carried away insensible. After the sale, the people came to Dave in tears. They couldn't do too much for him, and wanted to chip in and pay for his land, but he would not allow them to do so. Dave was fond of good liquor. At that time, Eli B. Williams kept a grocery and liquor shop on Clark Street. Williams took the big fellow back to his store, pointed to a shelf in which was the choicest vintage of the day and region, and told him to help himself. On the morning of the sale, the settlers had got a tip from the sheriff that allayed their fear of any interference from him. Ed Sherman was sheriff. He was a brother of Frank Sherman, who built the Sherman House. That morning, Ed took Crandall aside and said, "Dave, I've got to go out in the country today. I hope you will get along smoothly and have no trouble while I'm gone." Crandall and the settlers took this to mean that they were to go ahead and clean out the speculators if they wanted to. Crandall did not remain in the neighborhood long. Things became too tame for him, and he moved to southwestern Missouri where there was more excitement.